everyone. Hope everyone is having a great day or a great night, wherever you are. Today we're going to continue our lesson with the Mesopotamian civilizations. Last time we talked about Sumeria, and this time we're going to talk about Akkad, or the Akkadian Empire. My writing, it's getting a little shaky today. So, many scholars believe that the Akkadian Empire was the first multi-national political entity. So this was from about 2334 to about 2218 BCE. So around this time, or maybe a little bit after, is when the Sumerians were taken over by Sargon, who was the first ruler of the Akkadians. And they called him Sargon the Great. He's the one last time that we think that he made up the story, or I guess it could have been true, but about him being placed in a basket. And it's just interesting because that's the story that they use in the Bible for Moses. So the actual let's see, first ruler, Akkadian Empire. So this was the Akkadian Empire, and Sargon ruled. He was the first one, so he started it, and he ruled until 2279. Akkad, right here, is actually, they consider it like the city. It's like where it all started, so it's the seat, the main hub of the Akkadian Empire, but they haven't actually been able to locate it. They just know it's like a place because it's referenced and in like records and stuff like that. But they don't actually know where this was located exactly, and they don't totally know why the Akkadian Empire fell or when exactly it fell. You know, in this time, it's actually, you know, these empires go on for a long time. If you think about how old, like, America, North America, like the United States is, it's actually only like a few hundred years old. Of course, before that, it was someone else's land that we technically stole. I mean, it's the truth. I'm sorry. It was their land for a really long time, thousands of years. So we're just like a little baby in civilization terms. So yeah, these actually went on for a really long time, even though the amount of information that we have, it seems like it's just like a quick run through history, but there's a lot more that happened that we don't know about. So this city was also called Agade. That's how it's spelled. Agade. 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 It's just my American English probably isn't doing it justice. So they know that this city was located somewhere along the western bank of the Euphrates River. They think that possibly it was located between the cities of Sippar and Kish, or between something called Mari and Babylon, which we will talk about Babylon because it's one of the four main civilizations that took place in the Mesopotamian region during this time. According to stories or legend, Akkad was built by Sargon the Great, who was thought to have unified Mesopotamia, and under the Akkadian Empire and his rule, he kind of set the stage for future government structures to be made. So he kind of had a lot to do with the beginning of the future government of Mesopotamia. So in records and things that have been written down, Sargon claimed that the Akkadian Empire stretched from the Persian Gulf through what is now modern-day Kuwait, that's a U. I don't know what's going on with that. Iraq, Jordan, and Syria, I'm gonna need more room, and to the Mediterranean Sea, and Cyprus. Hope I'm spelling all these right. And some say it goes as far as Crete. But that's what they've kind of established from what records of what Sargon has said and what other people have recorded. You know, they also have to match up what they're saying in ancient records to what they think it pertains to in modern day. So because of how far this went, they say that Sargon created the first multinational empire in the world. So he kind of started this kind of idea of taking over places like Sumeria and creating a multinational empire, is what this is called. So although Sargon is credited with this, the king of Uruk, whose name is very difficult, but I'm going to write it and try to say it. King Lugal-Zaggesi. King Lugal-Zaggesi. I bet that's pretty close. He was the first actual king of Uruk. So the Sumerians, to take tribes or smaller cities and unite them under one ruler. So he had already done that on a much smaller scale, with kind of just like tribes in his area. City of Mari, we actually talked about how Akkad could be in between Mari and Babylon. There are tablets that have recorded things about Sargon's rule and the unification, and they suggest that maybe Akkad was actually a city already, that Sargon kind of took over and like restored because it had like fallen. So they're not sure if he created that city or if he kind of like took a city that was in like decay and like restored it. So that happens a lot with civilizations, as they like go into a place that's already been kind of like established and they kind of just build on top of it. So that's why the further down you go in layers with archaeology, the older it is, because people literally just build on top of each other. It's kind of cool. So this guy was defeated by Sargon when Sargon began to rise. They do these tablets at this place also suggest that the Akkadian language had been being spoken before the Akkadian Empire actually started. So he kind of, like, things were being established before Sargon, like, really took over, which is normal for, like, changes in civilization. So Sargon kind of, like, looked at the model of King Lagozagesi and used that model and, like, improved upon it and made his empire bigger and more grandiose and stronger, more stable than the Uruk ruler. So in Sargon's own like journaling and his own words, probably a scribe like recorded his words, he states that he went outside Mesopotamia and established relationships and trade routes by land and sea. So he kind of went the extra mile, and you would have to do that to build like a large civilization, but he went and established all the major trade routes, kind of like familiarized everyone with himself, that he would be trading there, while the king of Uruk had brought together the civilizations of the Sumerian people. Sargon's ideal dream was to like take over the world. And we've had several examples of this. I actually didn't know that the first real example was like in Mesopotamia. So this is really cool for me too. But yeah, Sargon had big dreams, and he obviously didn't know how big the world was, but he wanted to take over. He was ready. After this happens with any civilization, and it did happen with this one, Sargon established a unity in this area which allowed for civilization to thrive with art, with religion, with language. All these things thrived because, they had security under one rule, and also like it kind of unified the ideas and the religion of people, which really gives people the chance to like be creative and kind of go the extra mile in making like amazing things. So they had advances in agriculture, they had advances in literature, and scientific advances. So that was really, it was good, but you know, taking over people's like land is never really that great. So they established advances in religion, art, science, language, literature, and agriculture. So lots of advancements during this time in the Akkadian Empire under Sargon's rule. We talked about last time how the Sumerians got kind of like engulfed into this culture. So they still existed, obviously, and I'm sure a lot of them remembered where they came from and that they were Sumerian. But, you know, he unified all these people and they kind of established the same culture. And so that it allows all these advances to be able to be made, but it kind of also allows for a lot of people to forget like their origins or their original language or their like customs. We see that all the time today. So the Sumerians, the ones that kind of kept themselves Sumerians, they knew, and they kept records. And they have records of 5 kings during the Akkadian period. The first one, of course, is Sargon. Second is called Rimush. And then Manishtushu, Naram-Sin, This is also sometimes Sin and Sharkali, Shari. Interesting language. I think it'd be interesting to learn more about how the language is like spoken, what it sounds like. That's so cool. The Sumerians became Akkadians, and the language overtook Sumerian language, except for they still used some of the Sumerian language during like rituals and some of the Akkadian like customs or like the dress and the writing and religious practices kind of infiltrated the customs of the Sumerians. So religion, dress, and some of the writing was like based originally on Sumerian aspects. So now we're going to go through these rulers a little bit here. We've already gone over Sargon a little bit, but we're going to kind of make sure we've covered him. Just put Sargon down here. Reminds me so much of Sauron. I'm still reading the Silmarillion. It's going to take me forever. But it's just like so good. I love it. And I just always have Lord of the Rings on the brain. It's making me crazy. So Sargon was thought to conquer the 4 corners of the universe, which I love because his universe was so small compared to the actual universe. He maintained this order through military campaigns We may have talked about this in like our overview that we had about Mesopotamia. So we know that Sargon, during his rule, there were a lot of advancements. During this time, there were also the creation of roads. And we also know that he advanced trade. So he really, really expanded trade, which always makes the civilization absolutely explode. Just because you have access to all these things, these different things that can like enrich your life, and new things can create ideas for newer things. So that's kind of what happens. They also say that the first like postal service was established during this time, which I love. And they would take clay tablets and they would put Akkadian cuneiform, is what they called it now. Like writing on it. And then they would wrap it with something that's kind of like a clay envelope and write the person's name on it. And they also had like addresses, which is amazing. So they would also have a seal of the sender. And, if the recipient got the envelope and the envelope was broken, it meant that someone opened like the message. And so they would know if someone had read it or not. So if it was completely enclosed and the envelope wasn't broken, then they would know that the message hadn't been seen by anyone except for the sender. So that's interesting. In later Babylonian texts, there's people called the citizens of Akkad. And these were actually like administrators and governors. Of over 65 different cities under the Akkadian Empire. It's pretty big. Like we see in multiple ruling civilizations, Sargon placed his daughter, Enheduanna. Ooh, that's pretty. So, Enheduanna was placed as a high priestess in a city that's like far away from where Sargon was, so that she could have sway and political control over the religious community in those areas, and she could report back to her father. Dealings. We talked about her. Yeah, we talked about her before because she's known as the first, like, writer or author in the world. So, pretty big deal. So she was the high priestess of a goddess, I believe, called Inanna. And she wrote really beautiful hymns to Inanna. So she was a very capable and very like powerful priestess and very intelligent, and seems to be just like actually a pretty level-headed good person, and wrote amazing like poetry and kind of like music. So yeah, she's the first known named author in the history of civilization that we know. So Sargon reigned for 56 years. Pretty impressive considering he kind of like established the Akkadians. So he died in 2279. And his son Rimush took over. So this is the time where Rimush was ruling, and he ruled from when his father died to 2271. So only ruled for 8 years. He maintained his father's politics. Pretty closely, like he kept everything going that his father had established. He campaigned against someone named Elam, and he defeated him. And in his own writings, he claimed to have brought great wealth back to the Akkadians. Rimush only ruled for 9 years before he died, and his brother Manishtushu took over. And a lot of people think that maybe he had something to do with Rimush's death because he wanted to rule. That has definitely happened before. So during his rule, he was thought to increase trade again. And he was thought to start like large architectural projects, and started kind of the construction of like temples and things like that, like larger, more intricate buildings. Before this, he had to kind of stop revolts because there were just, there was so much like change in the throne. People had like unrest, so he had to stop revolts and kind of bring peace or rest to the area before he could start any of this stuff. He had to kind of bring everything like down. He kind of started like land reform, and there's something called Manishtushu's obelisk, which is a record of all the parcels of land that they had. So this kind of recorded the distribution of land, and who owned it, which is cool. It said that his death was caused by his courtiers. So people close to him were thought to have murdered him. They don't really know why. They don't have like a motive. They don't know who. Yeah, but they do believe that like people in his trusted circle actually had something to do with it. Again, not too uncommon. So now we're going to talk about Naram-Sin, who was considered the greatest of the Akkadian kings. It's quite the title. So this was Manishtushu's son. He reigned from 2261 to 2224. So like 40 years, something like that, 35 years. Like most takeovers with a ruler, he had to kind of settle everybody down, and he had to suppress rebellion. Before he could do anything else. But once he did that, the civilization under his reign absolutely flourished. So like his predecessors, he expanded the empire. He expanded trade, and order was kept very well during his time. He also personally campaigned with his like military. They think all the way to possibly Egypt. Super cool. After we finish the Mesopotamian civilizations, I want to kind of go through other civilizations, the earliest ones first that kind of like popped up, and go through their history a little bit. I'm not going to talk about any kind of like modern disputes, because there's a lot of sensitive countries around this area. So I'm just going to talk about like ancient history. So there's an artifact called the Victory Stele. I never know how to say it. Of Naram-Sin. And this is a depiction of a celebration of the victory of Naram-Sin. And this is over Satuni, who was the ruler of a place called Lulubi. Lullubi. This depiction is him climbing up a mountain over the bodies of his enemies. And he's depicted as kind of like a god. So, like his grandfather, he claimed that he was king of the four corners of the universe. And he had established even more distance of like trade. So he was bold in the sense that he would put a sign next to his name that indicated that he was on the level of the other gods in the pantheon. So he considered himself, this is kind of the first in this area idea that like a ruler is also a god. So he was bold and he called himself like a god, like he was like equal with the gods. Even with his like great reign, later Mesopotamian people would refer to him the curse of Agade, which is that word for Akkadian also. It's another word for Akkad. This is a literary text so this text tells the story of Naram-Sin, and he was demanding an answer from the gods for something. He thought he deserved an answer, he demanded it, and he like went there to the gods to try and get the answer by force. So the great Sumerian god Enlil, which I love that name, it sounds elvish. Enlil. They say he withdrew his pleasure from the city of Akkad. And forbade any of the other gods from going to the city and giving the city their blessing. He was just done with this guy after that, apparently. So in the story, Naram-Sin doesn't know what he did to incur like the wrath of the gods. Interesting. So he gets his like army and he marches to where Enlil lives, which is a temple in the city of Nippur called Iker. So he marches. He waited 7 years of depression and he didn't hear anything from the gods, and it was really like upsetting him. So he marches to this temple in Nippur and destroys it. And that's the temple of this god Enlil. Enlil's very upset, and the other gods are really upset too. So they send this people called the Gutians to lay waste to a city, to Akkad. I'm going to read this description of these people. I'm not 100% sure if these are, I'm pretty sure it's a real group of people. So this description is really offensive. So just trigger warning, beware. All right, so it's written that these Gutians are a people who know no inhibition, with human instincts but canine intelligence, and with monkey features. So that's how they're described, and I don't appreciate that, but I don't know what they're talking about. So that's what it is written. So this is how, in this story, the end of the Akkadian Empire happens. These people go into Akkad and they kill a bunch of people, and then the rest of the people like starved and their bodies were like rotting in the streets. It's nice. And that was the end of the empire, and that's how it ended, apparently. However, this tale has no historical backing. Nothing like this is in any kind of record. It's just like a literary text that told this like fantastic tale. They don't think any of this happened. They think that later, this text was written as an example because Naram-Sin claimed that he was on the same level as the gods. Someone later took this story and said, that's incorrect. You're not on the same level with the gods. And so they kind of like made up a story to say that this guy was punished for thinking that he was on the same level as the gods, even though he wasn't in history. But yeah, they wanted to like make this into an example of why you shouldn't think that just because you're like a king, you're on the same level as God. So it was kind of like a lesson, they think. Really interesting stuff. Oh, the last person we're going to talk about is Shar Kali Shari. So he was the son of Naram-Sin. He, of course, also had to stop revolts after he became king. It's interesting that that happened like every time in Akkadia. So he was not good at this. He could not create any kind of like civil rest. So he couldn't even solve like issues within his own civilization, which meant that he was not able to stop attacks from larger other civilizations. He had a lot of people come in, and the civilization was already kind of disintegrating. So, again, there's no evidence that Naram-Sin, his father, destroyed this temple. However, during his son's reign, part of what he did was rebuild this temple to this god, and he was actually reigning when the Gutians invaded. So I think it was a real group of people, and I'm just really sorry that that's the description. It makes me sick. With cultural insensitivity. So they think that's probably part of the reason that this story was like made. They had all these elements that would kind of like make this great like moral story. So the Gutians, this guy was fighting continual war with the Elamites and the Amorites. But the Gutians came in and invaded, and this is what is most commonly associated with the fall of the empire of the Akkadians. So it was definitely after this king died, there was a lot of like confusion and unrest, and people didn't really know what to do anymore, and they were kind of like taken over. After this collapse, something called the Mesopotamian Dark Age ensued after this. So, nice job, Sharakali Shari. I don't know if it was actually his fault, but I just said it was, but actually, a lot of people, historians, believe that it wasn't really this that ended the empire. It was like climate change. It caused famine. So climate change caused like famine and possibly disruption of trade if they don't have anything to trade. And really weakened the empire so that they couldn't fight against an enemy that they in the past had been able to overcome. So it was easy for their city to be invaded by enemies. So it's said that he had 2 sons, and they both kind of ruled like the city and like the surrounding area for a few years after he died. But there was so much like confusion. It just kind of like disintegrated into not even being like a civilization or a city anymore, and they were kind of taken over by a lot of other cities and civilization. So that's all I have for you today about the Akkadian Empire, and I learned a lot, so I hope that you did too. Next, I believe we'll talk about Babylon, the Babylonians. And then there's one more civilization after that. And then it kind of turns into like modern times. We can kind of like go over how people dispersed, but I'm definitely not going to be talking about any kind of like modern history. That's not something I'm like interested in. I love to see how people have evolved and how civilizations develop and evolve, and that's just something that I'm really interested in. Also, any kind of religious things. So there's a chance if I can find information, like religious information about some of these things, I might go through some of that, like gods and stuff like that. But this stuff is so old and kind of like scarce. It's hard to put pieces of information together when you're going back as far as like the Sumerians. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope you enjoyed this lesson today, and hopefully I'll see you in the